From his penthouse window high above Central Park, Michael Sterling watched his wife, Christina, linger at the entrance of their building. She was locked in an intense embrace with Jason Becker, a man who'd sworn loyalty to Michael for years, a supposed confidant. Jason had just dropped Christina off after hours spent in the city's glittering heart. This wasn't a first-time slip-up. It was the 5th clandestine rendezvous Michael knew about. Muffled snippets of their conversation drifted up, each word a fresh stab. Michael's gut twisted at their blatant affair, a performance played out in broad daylight. Jason's proposition hung in the air, a week-long escape. Christina, after a teasing pause, declined, her voice a playful yet cutting edge. "Not a whole week, Jason," she purred, playful but firm. "Maybe a weekend, but only if you agree to one thing." Jason's brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion. "What condition?" he asked, tilting his head, a spark of mischief in his eyes. Christina's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Michael has to foot the bill," she declared, a giddy thrill in her voice. Jason chuckled, a disbelieving shake of his head. "That's insane," he scoffed. "You know I make 10 times what he does. Why make him pay?" Christina's smile deepened, a sly glint in her eyes. "You're missing the point, darling. It's not about the money. It's about crushing him. You love watching him squirm, don't you?" Jason leaned back, stretching, as if dismissing the accusation, but a smirk played on his lips. "Well," he began, a playful tone creeping into his voice, "he is my best friend." "Oh, please," Christina interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Spare me the act. You relish tormenting him as much as I do. Admit it. Watching him crumble thrills you." Her voice lowered, a sultry whisper designed to ignite. "And it's the biggest turn-on for me." While her excitement was almost palpable, Jason's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his face. "Christina," he said, a mix of irritation and genuine emotion. "Why are we doing this? End it. Leave Michael. Come away with me. I'll marry you. We can build a life, a real life." She laughed, a light, dismissive sound, shaking her head. "Tell you what, sweetheart. Make him fund our little weekend getaway and I'll think about it. How's that?" Jason sighed, frustration etched on his features. But then, a slow, sly grin spread across his face. "Fine," he murmured, leaning closer to whisper something inaudible in her ear. He kissed her again, a lingering, possessive kiss, before finally retreating to his sleek black car. Christina watched him drive off, a triumphant smile plastered across her face. Then, with an air of casual confidence, she turned and entered the grand building. As she ascended the opulent staircase, her movements deliberate, she began to shed her clothing. A silk scarf here, a designer jacket there, a trail of discarded garments marking her ascent. By the time she reached the master bedroom, she was completely naked, having forgone underwear for her rendezvous with Jason. Inside, Michael sat motionless on the edge of the bed, his face a mask of pain. Christina strolled into the ensuite bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar, casually inspecting herself in the mirror. "I assume you heard everything," she said flatly, meeting his reflection with a smirk. "I'm leaving you for Jason. We're spending the weekend together, and you're paying for it. After that, consider us done." Michael's voice cracked, the sound raw with despair. "I've given you everything, Christina, since the day we met. I thought I made you happy. Do you even love me at all?" She turned to face him, her expression dripping with contempt. Love you? She scoffed. How could I? You're nothing but a pathetic doormat who lets his best friend steal his wife. Her words were like shards of ice, slicing through him. He turned away, his shoulders slumping, tears welling in his eyes. Why, Christina? He pleaded, his voice trembling. What about our vows? Don't they mean anything to you? Christina laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Vows? Don't make me laugh. Make me. Why should I care about promises made to someone as insignificant as you? Please, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Don't do this. I love you more than anything. She rolled her eyes, her tone icy. Love me all you want. Just don't ever think you'll touch me again. If I want satisfaction, I'll call Jason. Maybe I'll even let you watch. Would you like that, Michael? As she reveled in her cruelty, a change flickered across Michael's demeanor. His posture straightened, his jaw tightened, and a newfound resolve hardened his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, low, carrying a weight that made her freeze. Enough, he muttered, rising to his feet for the first time. Christina faltered, her smugness replaced by a flicker of unease. She watched as he walked purposefully out of the bedroom and down the stairs. Where are you going? She demanded, her tone mocking. Running off to cry somewhere? Maybe back to Mommy's house? Michael paused at the front door, his hand on the polished brass knob, turning to face her. His expression was one of quiet sorrow, not anger. Goodbye, Christina, he said simply, before stepping out into the cool New York evening. She stood in the doorway, watching as his Bentley roared to life and sped away. Shaking her head, she muttered, "Good riddance," before pulling out her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Hey, babe," she purred into the phone. "He's gone. Come over. I can't wait to see you." 3 days later, the rumble of a car pulling into the underground garage startled Christina, who was lounging in the kitchen, sipping a latte and flipping through the society pages of the New York Post. She looked up as Michael walked in, briefcase in hand. Without a word, without even a glance in her direction, he walked past her and disappeared into his home office. A surge of curiosity propelled Christina to her feet. Leaving her latte and the glossy magazine, she walked briskly to the door of Michael's study. She tried the handle. Locked. That was odd. Michael never locked that door. She rapped lightly on the mahogany panel, and after a brief pause, the lock clicked. With a slow turn of the knob, she opened the door. Inside, Michael was at his desk, intently focused on a map displayed on his large monitor. Christina assumed it was related to a new real estate development he was spearheading in the Hamptons. Without looking up, he asked curtly, "What do you need?" His gaze, when it finally met hers, was laden with an uncharacteristic weight. The harsh tone caught Christina off guard. Michael had never spoken to her like that before. Then again, she knew she hadn't been exactly kind recently. Trying to steady her voice, she said, I was worried about you. You've been gone for 3 days without a word. I called," she added, watching his expression harden. "But you didn't answer." His response was laced with derision. "Oh, you were worried about me?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Christina froze. Was this really her husband? Though he looked and sounded like Michael, something about him felt fundamentally altered, colder, sharper. Shoving aside her unease, she reached out to touch his face, but he recoiled, pulling away. The rejection stung. "What's wrong?" she asked, her frustration breaking through. "It's been 3 days. Don't you even want to kiss me?" Michael's stare was as cold as granite, his detachment palpable. After an unbearable pause, he shook his head. "No," he said bluntly, before turning back to his computer screen. "Close the door on your way out, Christina." Christina stood frozen for a moment, then quietly shut the door and retreated to the bedroom. Her heart raced. The man she had just seen was a stranger. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and dialed a familiar number. It barely rang before Jason answered. "Jason," she said urgently, her voice breaking. "He's back. But something's wrong. He's different. He wouldn't even kiss me." Jason's voice was calm, almost soothing. "Relax, sweetheart," he said smoothly. "He's probably just realized you're leaving him. There's nothing he can do to stop it now. I'll come by tonight, and we'll take care of everything. Just let me talk to him first." Christina hesitated, then nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Okay," she said softly. "I hope you're right. See you tonight. Take care, love." As she hung up, she didn't notice Michael sitting silently in his study, a faint, chilling smirk playing on his lips. He had overheard enough. That evening, headlights illuminated the driveway as Jason's Porsche pulled in. Christina flung open the front door before he even had a chance to knock. She kissed him deeply, a desperate act of reassurance for herself. "Where is he?" Jason asked, once they broke apart, his voice low. She gestured towards the study. "He hasn't left that room all day." Nodding, Jason straightened his shoulders. "I'll talk to him alone," he said firmly. "This won't take long." Jason approached the study and knocked on the door. Finding it locked, he called out, "Michael, it's Jason. Can we talk?" There was a brief silence before the lock clicked. Jason stepped inside, offering a cautious smile as he extended a hand in greeting. But his smile faltered, and he froze mid-motion. Michael was lounging in his chair, his gaze steady and unnervingly sharp. He made no effort to stand or speak. Jason awkwardly lowered his hand. "Close the door and sit down," Michael instructed, gesturing towards the chair across from him. His voice was calm, yet it carried an edge that made Jason uneasy. Jason complied, closing the door and sitting down. Michael poured himself a drink with deliberate movements, but offered nothing to Jason. "No drink for me," Jason tried to joke, attempting to lighten the heavy atmosphere. Michael ignored him, his expression unreadable. "Friend," Michael began slowly, the word drawn out as if it were foreign to him. "Are you truly my friend?" The question made Jason shift uncomfortably. "Of course, Michael," Jason replied, forcing a smile. "We've been best friends for years. You know that." "Best friends," Michael repeated, his lips curling into a sardonic smile. "Tell me, Jason, what kind of best friend steals another man's wife?" Jason's confidence wavered. His voice was unsteady as he stammered, "Michael, I didn't mean—" "Spare me the excuses," Michael cut him off sharply. "You've been circling like a vulture, waiting for your moment to take Christina. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Jason fell silent, the weight of Michael's words pressing down on him. "How much do you want her?" Michael asked, leaning forward, his voice dangerously calm. "What is she worth to you?" Jason blinked, caught off guard. I don't know what you mean," he said, his voice faltering. Michael let out a low chuckle. "Don't play dumb, Jason. You're a businessman. Every transaction has a price, so let's talk. What's Christina worth to you?" Jason struggled for a response, his confusion evident. Michael leaned back in his chair, his smirk returning. "I'll make it simple," he said casually. I like that new Porsche of yours. How much did it cost? Jason hesitated before answering. Over 300,000. It was custom made. He tried to sound confident, but his voice betrayed him. And it's paid off? Michael asked smoothly. All yours? Yes, Jason said, his tone defensive. It's mine. Good, Michael said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Then here's the deal. Your Porsche and 25% of your equity. Jason's eyes widened in shock. Wait, you want my car and a quarter of my assets for Christina? Michael's smile widened, but his eyes were as cold as steel. That's the offer, he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. Take it or leave it. Jason tensed, his jaw clenched, disbelief flashing across his face. That's over $50 million, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of outrage and shock. Have you completely lost your mind? Or is this some kind of sick prank? Michael, unperturbed, glanced briefly at his monitor. 52 million to be exact, he replied in a measured, unemotional tone. And no, I'm not joking. Jason shot to his feet, pacing the room with jerky, restless movements, muttering under his breath. Frustration radiated off him as he cast accusatory glances at Michael, who remained composed, calmly rifling through a stack of papers. After a tense silence, Jason stopped abruptly, slumping back into his chair. He fixed Michael with a hard stare, equal parts exasperation and unease. Let me get this straight, Jason began, his voice taut and subdued. You're asking for my car and 25% of my equity in exchange for Christina? A smirk tugged at the corners of Michael's lips. That's exactly what I'm asking for, he confirmed, leaning back in his chair with an air of smug satisfaction. Christina did warn you that manipulating me wouldn't be easy. Jason's hands balled into fists. Why am I even entertaining this? He muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. Without a word, Michael reached over to his printer, retrieving a freshly printed page. He slid it across the table towards Jason. You might want to take a look at this, he said, his grin unwavering. Think about what happens when this lands on your boardroom table, gets shared with your shareholders, or worse, ends up in the media. Jason's eyes darted across the document, his face draining of color as he read. The letter laid bare every sordid detail of his affair with Christina, exposing him in a way that left him defenseless. He slammed the paper down. This is blackmail, he spat, glaring at Michael. Call it whatever you like, Michael replied with a casual shrug, pouring himself another glass of scotch. The deal's on the table until noon tomorrow. After that, the terms double. 50% equity, plus controlling interest in your company. This is outright extortion, Jason snapped, throwing his arms up in fury. You'll never get away with it. Michael took a slow sip of his drink, unbothered. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, he said with infuriating nonchalance. But let's not pretend you don't want her badly enough to consider it. So, Jason, what's it going to be? Jason hesitated, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice barely audible. Michael nodded, feigning understanding. Sure, you've got until noon tomorrow, he said, tapping his watch for emphasis. Time's ticking. Jason wiped his brow with a handkerchief and stumbled towards the door, his movements unsteady. Michael didn't bother looking up as he left. Close the door behind you, he called out, signaling the conversation was over. Through his window, Michael watched Jason and Christina leave together, chuckling to himself as he reached for his phone to make a few calls. Later that evening, he heard Christina's laughter outside as she returned in Jason's Porsche. Their voices drifted through the open window. "Just a few more days, Jason," she said, "and we'll be free of him. A fresh start." Christina laughed softly, pushing Jason's hand away as he reached for her. "Not now, Jason. Soon," she promised with a sly smile. "I can't wait to see him groveling as a waiter." She kissed him briefly before heading inside, leaving Jason to drive away. Inside the penthouse, Christina noticed the light on in Michael's study. She tried the door but found it locked. "Michael?" she called out, pressing her ear to the wood. "I want to leave from the other side." Michael's calm voice responded, but his words were distant, muffled by the thick door. After a moment, Christina gave up and went upstairs, unease swirling in her thoughts. The next morning, Michael received a curt text from Jason. "Deal." Smiling to himself, Michael sent over the details of an offshore account. A few hours later, the funds were confirmed. He dispersed the money across several private accounts and sent a simple message to Jason and Christina. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late." Michael spent the afternoon preparing for the evening. Cooking had always been a therapeutic escape for him, and this meal carried a sense of finality. By 6 o'clock, the aroma of the food filled the penthouse. Christina returned home, visibly surprised. "You're cooking?" she asked, eyeing him wearily. "I didn't know you could." Michael didn't look up as he wiped his hands on a towel. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he said evenly. "If you'd spent more time here instead of with Jason, maybe you'd have learned something." His words stung, and Christina flinched. She reached out, but he turned away, his expression cold. "Go get ready," he said curtly. "Your lover will be here soon." Tears welled up in her eyes as she retreated upstairs, her steps heavy with regret. Staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, she whispered, "What have I done?" At precisely 7:00 p.m., Jason arrived. Michael opened the door, his demeanor cool and distant. Jason handed over a folder containing signed documents, along with a set of car keys. "I guess it's business first," Jason said, forcing a laugh. Michael pocketed the keys without a word. "As promised," he said, his tone clipped. "Help yourself to a drink." Shortly after, Christina descended the stairs, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure. The absence of her wedding ring was glaring. Michael pulled out a chair for her at the table, his expression impossible to read. She eased herself into the chair with poise, her smile soft yet unwavering. Across from her, Jason collapsed into his seat, his grin stretching as far as his confidence. "You look absolutely radiant," he said, lifting her hand to his lips in an exaggerated display of affection. "And I see those rings are gone now, progress at last." Her lips curved slightly as Michael approached the table, balancing a silver tray with 2 bubbling glasses of champagne. He placed them down with precision, vanishing briefly into the kitchen before returning with a steaming dish in hand. When he lifted the lid, the warm aroma of lasagna enveloped them. "Smells incredible, Mike," Jason said, shaking out his napkin with a self-satisfied air. "Maybe you've missed your true calling all these years." Michael didn't respond, his face unreadable as he served generous portions onto their plates. Christina hesitated, her fork poised in midair as she cast a glance in his direction. "Aren't you joining us?" she asked, her voice gentle but uncertain. Michael shook his head and quietly began pouring champagne into their glasses. "No," he replied, his tone distant. "Tonight is for the 2 of you. I wouldn't dream of interfering in your celebration." He stepped back, watching as they raised their glasses in a toast, their shared laughter filling the room. Soon, they were so engrossed in each other that neither noticed when Michael slipped out of sight, a peculiar smirk playing on his lips. In the privacy of his study, Michael settled into his chair and checked the time. "Not much longer," he muttered, the words barely audible. True to his prediction, the silence was shattered moments later by two muffled thuds and the faint clatter of something hitting the floor. Rising with deliberate calm, he strode back to the dining room. There, Jason and Christina sat slumped in their chairs, unconscious. Jason's head rested awkwardly against his plate, his arm hanging limp. Christina had collapsed to the side, her dress riding up enough to reveal the lace trim of her stockings. Her head hung forward, and shards of broken glass were scattered around her limp arm. Michael took in the scene with a cold, measured satisfaction. "Perfect," he murmured. "Out like lights." He moved with practiced efficiency, changing into more utilitarian clothes before setting to work. He stripped the unconscious pair of their clothes, arranging their bodies into a twisted, intimate tableau. Using rough rope, he bound their limbs tightly together, ensuring they were inseparably entwined. From the garage, he fetched a wheeled cart, maneuvering their tangled forms onto it before securing them with heavy chains to keep them immobilized. Once gagged and restrained, their bodies were stuffed into a large sailcloth bag, carefully selected for this very purpose. A dolly and hoist allowed him to transfer the bag into the trunk of his Bentley, locking it with precision. Under a sky freckled with stars, Michael started the engine and left the glittering city behind. Hours later, he reached an isolated location, pulling off the highway onto a shadowed clearing overlooking a dark, still lake. As he opened the trunk, faint rustling and muffled sounds emanated from the bag. He unfastened the top just enough to reveal their bewildered faces, their wide eyes brimming with fear as they tried to make sense of the suffocating darkness. Michael leaned in, holding a stun gun aloft for emphasis. "If you stay quiet, I'll remove the gags and explain," he said evenly. "But if either of you scream, I promise it won't end well for you." He punctuated his point with a sharp crackle from the device, prompting frantic nods from both captives. After removing their gags, Christina was the first to speak, her voice shaky and desperate. Where are we? What's going on? Who are you?" Jason chimed in, his tone just as panicked. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from us?" Michael's gaze hardened as he stared at them. "You're standing at the very spot where your husband decided his life wasn't worth living anymore," he said coldly, fixing his eyes on Christina. "This is where Michael Sterling took his final breath." Christina's mouth fell open, her face draining of all color. "No, that's not true. That can't be true." "Oh, it is," Michael said sharply, his words cutting like a knife. "Do you know why he did it? Because of you. He told me everything, about your cruelty, your betrayal, your indifference. You left him with nothing, Christina. Nothing." He turned his icy glare toward Jason. "And you, his so-called best friend. You stabbed him in the back, stole his wife, and laughed in his face while you did it. Some friend." Tears streamed down Christina's face as she shook her head. "No, Michael never said anything. I didn't know he had a brother." Michael let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "Of course you didn't. He kept me hidden, trying to shield you from the darkness I bring. But here I am, cleaning up the wreckage you left behind. And now," he gestured toward the glimmering water behind them, "you'll get what you deserve. Welcome to Bottomless Lake, the place where Michael ended his suffering and where your reckoning begins." The lake shimmered ominously under the moonlight as Michael dragged them toward its edge. The weight of his vendetta hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting as the night bore witness to his grim justice. You took twisted delight in tormenting him, playing with his feelings, building up his pride only to crush it, exploiting every chance to belittle him. But you swore to me that Christina and I would have forever. Jason's voice cracked with raw despair as he glared at his captor, his head lifting defiantly despite his anguish. You betrayed me. You lied to me. Jason's shout fractured into a desperate cry, his fury barely masking his fear. Michael's only response was a cold, humorless laugh. Technically, I didn't lie, Michael replied, a smug grin curling his lips. I promised you and Christina would share the rest of your lives. That promise still stands. What I left out, Michael continued, his voice as steady as a blade, was just how short those lives would be. You'll share your time, yes, intensely, dramatically, even romantically, depending on how you look at it. But you'll die on the same day, a tragic ending. Poetic, wouldn't you say? Especially considering the little plot you two cooked up against my brother. It's justice, balanced and poetic. Please, I'm begging you, don't do this to us, Christina sobbed, her tears streaking her face as she struggled to make him listen. But her pleas only seemed to harden Michael's expression, his cold eyes narrowing as he looked at her with utter contempt. Interesting, he said flatly, his tone cutting like ice. Michael told me he begged you with those exact words. He pleaded for mercy. And how did you respond? You mocked him. You carried on your sordid affair in plain sight and laughed when he confronted you. You shattered him, broke him completely, and when he asked you to stop, what did you tell him? To accept his fate? Michael's voice dropped into a venomous snarl. Now it's your turn to accept yours. Christina screamed in fury, her voice filled with both rage and terror as she thrashed against the chains that confined her. You're insane! Let us go! Someone will come for you. You won't get away with this. Michael shrugged, his expression indifferent. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. By the time anyone starts asking questions, they'll find a beautifully written farewell letter on your computer. It's quite touching, if I say so myself. He tilted his head slightly, as though considering a minor detail. But let's not dwell on that. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, as though sharing a macabre secret. You've heard about this lake, haven't you? They call it bottomless for a reason. No one's ever found its depths, and I can assure you, no one will ever find you either. That chain binding you together will ensure you sink straight into the abyss. He gave the chain a sharp jerk, the metallic clinks echoing ominously. Jason and Christina were paralyzed with terror, their faces pale as the weight of their fate pressed down on them. Their trembling was almost imperceptible, their voices stolen by fear. Michael watched them for a moment, a thin smile curling his lips. You've got maybe a minute of consciousness once you hit the water, he said, his mock sincerity dripping with malice. A couple of extra minutes of life after that, if you're lucky. Look at it this way. You're getting more time than most. So say your goodbyes. He sighed theatrically, his tone dripping with false pity. What a pity. There won't be any vows this time. No rings, no music, no priest to bless your union. But hey, enjoy your last honeymoon. With that, Michael grabbed hold of the bag, tipping it with all his strength. The two tumbled out, limbs flailing as they fought against the unyielding grip of the chain binding them. Their screams tore through the night, rising in a crescendo of desperation before the lake swallowed them whole. The splash reverberated in the stillness, and Michael watched as the heavy chain pulled them down, their struggles fading beneath the dark surface. Bon voyage, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the last faint bubbles rising to the surface. The lake returned to its eerie calm, moonlight dancing across the rippling water. Michael turned back to the boat, starting the engine with a low rumble that shattered the silence. The faint glow of the marina lights pierced the pre-dawn fog as he navigated back to the dock. He tied off the boat with practiced ease, cut the engine, and strode toward the sleek Porsche waiting in the shadows. Sliding into the driver's seat, he started the car, relishing the quiet hum of the engine as he pulled out his phone. He made a mental note to deal with the bag later. Burn it, just to be certain. He typed a quick message. "It's done." The reply came immediately. "Thanks, bro. Enjoy the ride, my friend." And this is where the story ends.